What if everything you've ever been taught was wrong? What if the rules weren't real? What if common sense was just the fear of those who never dared to dream? And what if the word impossible was just a suggestion? In 1976, inside a dusty garage in Los Altos, two young minds soldered wires and defied gravity. But only one of them wasn't building a machine, he was building belief. His name was Steve Jobs. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a mathematician. He was a rebel with vision, a fire starter with no extinguisher, a kid who dared to believe that art and code could dance. While the world worshipped logic, Jobs worshipped wonder. While others followed manuals, he followed madness. And from that madness came magic. You see, ordinary minds copy reality, but extraordinary minds, they bend it. When Steve walked into a boardroom, he wasn't just selling computers. He was selling portals, devices not of metal and wire, but of dreams and defiance. He said, "Here's to the crazy ones." But what he really meant was, here's to those who build before belief. Every titan of history knew this secret. Edison didn't invent the light bulb with logic, he invented it with obsession. Lincoln didn't end slavery with ease, he ended it with relentless clarity. Jobs didn't give us devices, we already had devices. Jobs gave us belief in the unseen. Because the future doesn't belong to those who wait. The future belongs to those who disrupt. The ones who look at what is and whisper, "That's cute." But here's what's next. The ones who throw perfection in the trash and chase insanely great. The ones who understand it's not about building a product. It's about building a movement. He said, "Make a dent in the universe." And he did, but not with data, not with spreadsheets, not with logic. He did it with intuition, with taste, with courage so unreasonable it looked like lunacy until it didn't. Because history only remembers the ones who refused to behave, the ones who broke the algorithm, the ones who stared at a blank screen and saw a revolution, the ones who risked ridicule, rejection, and ruin to say, "This will exist." So what about you? Are you still asking for permission? Still waiting for clarity? Still begging for the blueprint? Jobs didn't follow a map, he drew it. He didn't knock on doors, he kicked them open. And when the world laughed at his ideas, he turned that laughter into fuel. Because here's the truth they'll never teach in school. The world was never changed by the realistic. It was changed by the ridiculous, by those willing to look foolish before they looked fearless. So maybe your ideas don't make sense to them yet. Good. They're not supposed to. Maybe they say your dreams are too big. Perfect. They're meant to choke on them. Because if you want to build something that matters, you have to be willing to look like you've lost your mind. Before they say you found genius, the line between magic and madness is belief. And Steve Jobs believed so hard, so loud, so relentlessly, that the world finally had no choice but to believe with him. This is your moment, not to follow, not to explain, not to seek validation, but to command chaos, to break the pattern, to build the magic only you were born to create. You don't need permission. You need conviction. You don't need approval. You need obsession. You don't need a degree. You need fire. They told him the dots wouldn't connect. But Steve, he believed otherwise. Not because he had the evidence, But because he had the vision, he dropped out, but not out of life. He walked campus halls like a monk in meditation, sitting in on calligraphy classes, not for grades, but for aesthetic perfection. And years later, when the Macintosh was born, that seemingly useless skill became the signature soul of Apple. This is how destiny works. Not in straight lines, but in scattered dots. That only makes sense when you're brave enough to keep moving without the map. Steve didn't follow logic. He followed intuition. And where others saw risk, he saw revolution. Where others built machines, he built movements. Think different. Those two words weren't a tagline. They were a declaration of war against mediocrity, convention, and comfort zones. He didn't chase applause. He chased purity. He obsessed not over what the product could do, but how it made you feel. He asked, why does the back of the computer need to look beautiful if no one sees it? And then he answered, because I will know. That is legacy. That is magic. Every detail mattered. Every curve, every click, every pixel. Because to Steve, good was not good enough. Perfection was not a goal. It was a requirement. And when he was fired from Apple, yes, fired from the very kingdom he forged, he didn't collapse. He created again. Next, Pixar. He birthed worlds inside digital dreamscapes. And while the world watched the fall, he was silently engineering resurrection. That's the thing about visionaries. You can exile them, but you cannot erase them, because real power is not in position. It's in purpose. Steve Jobs didn't build computers. He sculpted culture. He didn't sell products. He sold belief. When he returned to Apple, he didn't just revive a company. He started a renaissance. He launched the iMac, iPod, iPhone, each a bullet of brilliance, fired at the heart of stagnation. People called him obsessive, ruthless, unreasonable, and he was. But here's the secret. All great creators are, because the world doesn't bend for those who ask politely. It yields to those who demand more from themselves, from their tools, and from time itself. Jobs once said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe." But this wasn't ego. It was obligation, the duty of those who see the invisible to bring it into form. And when cancer came for him, when time no longer bent to his will, he still stood before crowds, thin, trembling, but unstoppable, because the mission wasn't finished, because the flame inside burned louder than the clock ticking outside. He reminded the world, your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. That wasn't advice. That was a commandment from a man who saw death not as an end, but as the sharpest lens through which to view your life. So what about you? Will you wait for permission? Will you obey the rules built by people less courageous than you? Or will you burn the map, break the logic, and build your own impossible? Because somewhere inside you, there's a cathedral of genius, waiting for rebellion, waiting for obsession, waiting for the part of you that refuses to settle for a life that looks good, but feels hollow. You don't need more time. You need more truth. You don't need to learn more. You need to remember who you are, Before the world taught you to be small, Jobs was not a god. He bled, he broke, he failed, but he refused to shrink. He refused to let the world flatten his fire just to fit their form. So break their logic, build your magic, because in the end, legacy is not left in stone. It's left in the souls you awaken. By daring to be fully, unapologetically, you. Now go. Create what doesn't exist. And when they say it's impossible, smile and prove them right to fear you.